Hello, and welcome to the Renaissance English History Podcast's Tudor Minute, your regular, mostly daily dose of all things medieval and Renaissance in Tudor England. So today I'm going to talk about Henry VIII, the Henry VIII that we don't think about very much, the one who's the thin, charming, knightly, courtly, chivalrous Henry VIII, who actually did exist. So Henry was never meant to be the king. He was the second son, the spare. They have the heir and the spare. He was the spare. And his brother Arthur was the one who was meant to be the heir, who was meant to be the king. He had a name that harkened back to the mythical King Arthur. And he was going to be the chivalrous king that united England after the decades-long of Wars of the Roses. And that's what his parents wanted. And he married Catherine of Aragon, the Spanish princess, and then he sadly died when he was a teenager. So Henry becomes the heir. Second sons were brought up very differently than first sons. They were raised in the household of their mothers, or of women usually. So heirs would have been raised in a household where they learned government and military strategy, whereas the second sons were raised to learn the humanities. They normally went into the clergy. They normally went into the church. And so they would have been brought up to learn about the church history and about the humanities and about music and theology. And so Henry becomes the heir with this grounding in this very humanistic Renaissance education. And he also became a teenager just as Catherine of Aragon was kind of stuck in England because Henry VII didn't want to send her back to Spain after Arthur died. He was using her as kind of a bargaining tool for foreign policy. So Henry sees this kind of damsel in distress. And as soon as he becomes the king after Henry VII dies, the first thing he does is marry her. And he had this joint coronation where they were both jointly crowned, king and queen. And it was all very, very romantic. And he himself loved music. He was a composer. He was a brilliant athlete. He excelled. He wasn't really allowed to joust very much at all, actually. He did in secret once, a couple of times. But when he was very young, he wasn't allowed to joust because it's very dangerous. But he was very fit and he was very handsome. And he was just kind of this shining knight of England. And this isn't at all the Henry that we think of when we think about Henry VIII. And sadly, if the young Henry had seen the old Henry, he probably would have winced. And how he became the tyrant that we remember is actually the subject of a really interesting series that Dr. David Starkey did in the UK called Henry, Mind of a Tyrant. And it's on YouTube, so you can check it out. And I'll stick a link up for it. And so also then, to subscribe to the Renaissance English History Podcast, you can search on iTunes or Stitcher, or your podcast listening service of choice, or you can go to facebook.com/EnglandCast, ENGLANDCAST, facebook.com/EnglandCast, or EnglandCast, ENGLANDCAST, EnglandCast.com. Thanks so much for listening, watching. Have a fantastic day.